Hi everyone, and welcome to In Deep Geek Live. This is the latest in a series of videos looking at what was different parts of Westeros, and now we've moved over the Narrow Sea, and we're going to be looking at different parts of Essos. Today we're looking at, I have to say, probably my favourite city in the entire world of A Song of Ice and Fire, which is Braavos. This wonderful intricate city, very Venusian, with canals, high life, low life, lots of different parts of the city described in fantastic detail, both when Sam was there, also a lot when Arya was there as well. We've got the Iron Bank, we've got the influence of the Faceless Men. We've got a huge amount of possible political maneuverings with the Sea Lord. We've got the first sword of Braavos there with Syrio. We've got so many different angles to come from here, and yet it remains quite a mystery, this place. So we'll work our way through a lot of these different angles, just trying to tease out what is going on with Braavos, what's going to come with the story. Where are these different angles going to sort of start coming together? As always, I'm going to frame this around questions I've got from my patrons. So thank you, patrons. I hugely appreciate it. I thought what I would do to start with, though, is have just a few quick words about the news. It's sort of, I don't know if I can even really call it news, the continuing rumors about possible spin-offs of Game of Thrones. Now, I talked about this probably a month or so ago, but we've had another series of leaks, informal feeding of information to reputable news sources is probably the way it goes. Places like Entertainment Today, Hollywood Reporter, Variety, the kind of things that we can sort of trust what they're saying, in as much as they are feeding us information that HBO are giving them. And the latest is that, as we knew already, they are investigating lots of different possible projects around the world of Ice and Fire. Now, we had a few, about a month or so ago, there were the hints that maybe they were thinking about Duncan Egg. There was maybe an animated TV series, or possibly even an anime movie. There was some rumblings maybe about Robert's Rebellion. Now we've had three more possible things thrown in. The Voyages of Corlys Velaryon is there. How about the Nymeria's invasion, the 10,000 ships coming across when the Rhoynar came across over into Dawn? Also, something about Flea Bottom, the sort of the underbelly of King's Landing. Now, all of these are possibly interesting, and the sort of the high level point here is that clearly what is happening is that HBO wants to create a universe, and a Song of Ice and Fire universe of different TV shows, films, whatever, in the same way that you'll see Disney are charging ahead with, we've not just got the MCU anymore, it's not just the cinematic universe, we're also expanding out. We've got WandaVision, we've got various other TV shows coming through there. We've got Star Wars. They announced, I lost track, what was it, 8, 10 new different films and TV shows they were developing there. This is HBO seeing that they have got a huge franchise potentially and are wanting to sort of experiment with what they might develop. We've got one thing definitely happening. House of the Dragon is still happening. We don't need to worry about that. And that's still 2022. They've announced that's the aim, which probably means we're going to see that start filming. They've already announced half a dozen, maybe even more actors. So I think we'll probably see that start filming in the next few months, arriving towards the end of 2022. But now we've got a whole series of other possible things which are being mooted. And I'm just going to read, George R. R. Martin mentioned this on his Not a Blog, or sort of hinted at it when he was going through. He does this sometimes. He talks about all these different other projects he's got on the go, and then he suddenly he feels he has to sort of encourage us and remind us that, yes, most people who do come onto his blog are interested in Game of Thrones. And he said, of course, there's House of the Dragon at HBO, the Game of Thrones prequel series that Ryan and Miguel are helming, and maybe possibly some other stuff for HBO that I cannot tell you about, but is very exciting. And also a new series for AMC that I also cannot tell you about yet. Hint, hint. And then just at the very end, he says, you all know what is on my plate in prose. I need to finish Winds, then maybe write another Duncan Egg novella, and then get right into A Dream of Spring. That is, as I say, there's not much new there in terms of what his priorities are. I think we knew that, The Winds of Winter, then possibly another Duncan Egg, then A Dream of Spring was where he was going with this, the order that he was planning on working his way through these projects. There was, as is always the case, a possibility of reading too much into the fact that he talked about finishing The Winds of Winter, which is the first time for a while he's talked about finishing The Winds of Winter rather than just carrying on with it. So maybe he's got a little bit further on, but let's not overinterpret. But in terms of the TV shows, what I would say at this stage, there are two things. First of all, this is HBO testing the waters, seeing what people might be interested in. They're just throwing a few things out, seeing what the reaction is, what's the fan reaction to these different things. Might we be interested in something to do with King's Landing? What about Corlys Velaryon's different journeys? Would be interested in that? They're just subtly testing the waters. So that's what's happening now. They're not going to do all of these things, but they will probably do a few of them. The second thing to say is, and I mean, this isn't me saying this is good or bad. I think this is for each of us to come to our own judgment on. So it's just an observation. The further we've got into this process of HBO testing out ideas, the more we are going away from the original source material. Now, what I mean by that is the original suggestions were Duncan Egg. Great, we've got 3 Duncan Egg stories. They can happily adapt them. That's fine. That is an adaptation of something we've got there. We've got House of the Dragon, which is based on Fire and Blood. They've got a lot of source material there, but still, it's only a couple of 100 pages in reality, which they're probably looking to expand out over 5 seasons of maybe 10 episodes. So that's what, 50 hours worth from 200 pages. They can do, but they will have to add in a lot of extra created input. Now, where we're getting to now is looking at Corlys Velaryon's journeys. We don't even know exactly where he went on his journeys. It could be great. This could be a fantastic new series that is like Sinbad's adventures, but in the world of Ice and Fire. It could be absolutely fantastic, but it's not based purely. It's not going to be an adaptation of what George R. R. Martin wrote. This is going to be kind of inspired by, set in the world of A Song of Ice and Fire. He'll be going to places like Ibn, perhaps Ib. What do we know about that? About a page worth. And that's it. So the further we go in there, including like what about Flea Bottom in King's Landing, they will be creating a story there, a story which we do not already have. So maybe that's great. Maybe there's going to be some fantastic new stuff. It is moving further away from the source materials. So as I say, this isn't me saying it's good or bad, but it's just an observation on what they're doing. The more things that they're suggesting, the further away from the source material they are moving. Questions. Thank you so much. I'm getting some questions in on the chat. Ryan Larkin, first of all, thank you so much for moving across into Braavos here. Thank you for the super sticker, Ryan. I hugely appreciate it. Smith Crazy, thank you for the super chat, saying, super quick question about the Sea Lord. Do you think they could play a more direct role in the Winds of Winter, or is there investment in Targaryens ever since housing Dany or Viserys? Okay, there's a lot, and we will build up our understanding through this live stream as we're working through all the different angles, because Braavos is interconnected. It's not just like we can take one aspect and then another aspect and they're completely different. It's all interconnected. With the Sea Lord, the Sea Lord is not just the same person all the way through. There is a fair chance, and I have got a question about this later, but there's a fair chance, in fact, a pretty good chance, that the Sea Lord who housed Dany and Viserys is not the Sea Lord we have now. And there is also a very good chance, just reading between the lines of Arya's chapters in particular, that there is about to be a change in Sea Lord. Now, what that means is that there's going to be likely a change of policy by Braavos. What might they be doing? Well, I think the first question is, what has Braavos been doing thus far? A lot of behind the scenes stuff that I think we will definitely be covering with the Iron Bank, the Faceless Men, but nothing overt. The world has been hugely shifting these last few years. Daenerys has been taking over the Enslavers' Bay. Dragons have come again. She's been getting rid of slavery. We've had all of Westeros up in arms with the wars going on for the last half a decade. There's huge amounts of stuff going on, and Braavos largely has been just sitting there. So will the change in Sea Lord have an impact? Yes, it definitely will. They will be doing things in the future. Ariel Winchester, thank you so much for the super sticker. That's I'm not entirely sure what that is, but it's somebody's waving a flag with a number 1 on it. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Chris and Sarah, thank you, saying hello from Korea. Hi, Korea. Random question, but do you think Lady Stoneheart will rescue Sansa and kill Littlefinger? Being killed by the vengeful undead corpse of your love interest seems horrifying. It does, yeah. So it's not, we're talking mostly about Braavos today, but I will happily just pick this one off. Yes, that definitely sounds horrifying, that the Littlefinger is obsessed with Catelyn Stark, and he has transferred that obsession onto Sansa. So if Lady Stoneheart was the person who ended up killing him and rescuing Sansa, that would be massively satisfying. And I'm not going to rule it out completely. Clearly the show went in a different way, and Littlefinger went and Sansa went up north, but that does not mean that that has to happen in the show. Lady Stoneheart has got a role in the books. George R. R. Martin didn't just bring her back for no reason. However, I suspect that her role is focused in and around the Riverlands, and it is going to be focused in on the gaining revenge against the Freys. Now, Littlefinger, I suspect, is going to head up to the north with Sansa, and that is probably by boat up to White Harbour and then up to Winterfell from there, and that is going to cut out Lady Stoneheart, who's going to remain largely in the Riverlands, in my view. So yes, it would be horrifying. I'm not going to rule out 100%, if only because George R. R. Martin loves that kind of horrifying irony, but I don't think that's the way it's going to be going. Anders Graham, thank you so much, saying, in A Dance with Dragons, Arya notes that people in Braavos' taverns sometimes talk about Jon and the Watch. Is this because of his loan, or might they have other reasons? I think it's... So Braavos is a political city, and it's a very connected city to the world. And it's it's got shipping coming in and out all the time. So the taverns, particularly the taverns and the dockside where Aya spent a lot of her time working for the Faceless Men, she is getting stories about what's happening in the wider world, people coming in on boats and then going away. Now, she obviously picked up on what was happening with Sam and Darian and all the rest of it from the Night's Watch when they were coming down. With John as well, yes, so what is happening in the Night's Watch and the Wall, that is the main route that they would go down. If you're going to head anywhere from sort of the north, then you come down, stop off at Braavos, you change, basically you're sort of changing boats, changing trains is the equivalent of changing flights or whatever. That is what Braavos is. People come into there and then they go on from there to somewhere else. So that is, it's the kind of the hub of information and gossip. So that's what's going on there. They're not doing it because of the loan. I don't think that information will have come out really so much. It's just a sharing of information on the dockside as far as I'm concerned. Lady Eternals, no, I've already read that one. I think I have. Did I? Giving some early love to you, Dan, and all of our awesome moderators. I'm not sure if I have. Thank you very much, Lady Eternal. I'm going to be watching back later as I have a date tonight. Have an amazing date. Or if you're watching this back later, I hope you did have an amazing date. Have an awesome stream, everyone. Tyler Evans saying, excited for more Essos. What is Braavos' relationship with the other free cities like? And have they ever battled with certain free cities due to slavery? They have. So Braavos is counted as one of the free cities, but it's often described as the bastard daughter of Valyria. Whereas the other free cities were owned in one way or another by Valyria, the Valyrian freehold. Braavos wasn't. They had their independence from the beginning. They were founded by escaped slaves from the Valyrian freehold who took over some ships headed north when they were supposed to be going south. They headed north, found this area that became Braavos, this lagoon that was hidden behind these high pines with the mists, and they thought, this is a place that we can go and the dragons won't find us here. And that was the founding of the city. So they have never been like the other cities, and they have fundamentally always been anti-slavery. This is the first law of Braavos, is that they shall never allow a slave in Braavos. They do not have them. Now, have they fought against the other free cities over this? Yes, they have. Immediately after the fall, the doom of Valyria and the fall of the freehold, Volantis then decided it wanted to, it was now the big power, and it went and it tried to basically reboot the Valyrian freehold 2.0 without the dragons, with Volantis at the center. And Braavos forcibly opposed that, and they were probably the main force in helping stop that from actually taking any bigger hold than it did already. They've also a couple of times been involved in disputes down all the way with the Three Sisters in the disputed lands, but mostly their closest neighbor is Pentos, and they've had 6 wars with Pentos. They've won 4 of them. I think the most recent one, they gained an agreement from Pentos that Pentos would stop slavery. They would have no more part in the slave trade. So they have had these ongoing battles with the other free cities. What they've not tried to do is extend their long-term influence out across Essos. They are not empire building. They've occasionally had times where they've taken hold of the stepstones, but the stepstones are an incredibly important shipping route, and Braavos is all about trade. They're not so much about the warfare. Yes, they can build fleets, armadas very quickly if they need to, but they do not have a standing army. They're not there invading anybody. They're wanting to be trading and doing diplomacy. That is what they are all about. So they are a very different proposition to a lot of the other free cities. Excuse me. I have a sneeze, which is, it's nearly coming. So at some point I'm about to sneeze and I apologize in advance. But the moment you start thinking, you never can do it. Anyway, let's get to some questions from my patrons. Dominic Vaughan saying, hi, Robert. Hope you are well. Really enjoyed the random FAQs Lord of the Rings video the other day, actually, which reminds me, if you were a Tolkien fan, today is Tolkien Reading Day. Happy Tolkien Reading Day. If you're not a Tolkien fan, basically it's just a day when Tolkien fans like to read stuff that Tolkien did and share it and talk about it and all the rest of it. I'm a massive fan of what J.R.R. Tolkien has done, as I'm sure you know. The Tolkien content creators on YouTube have set up a playlist. I contributed to it, so I've done a video for it. But a lot of the other content creators who produce stuff around Middle-earth, Lord of the Rings, things like that, have created a playlist. If you want to check that one out, I tweeted it out if you want the playlist, or you check out my most recent video, and you can get the link to the playlist from there. So if you're a fan of Tolkien, then please do go and check that out. And there's lots of other fantastic creators. I try as much as I can to push people to other creators. I love having opportunities to share my own knowledge about stuff, but I am not the font of all knowledge. There are some fantastic people out there who have great expertise that I would love you to go and just enjoy what they produce as well. But Dominic Vaughan said, is Syrio dead? Or this is Syrio Forel, or do you think he survived his battle in Book 1 with Meryn Trant? Based on their respective abilities, and even despite the wooden sword disadvantage, I would still hazard he would win this. Okay, so this is a question which comes up a lot with Syrio Forel. Syrio Forel is not a huge character in the sense that he appears for couple of chapters, 2-3 chapters, and that's pretty much it. Now, his influence is felt. Aya remembers what he said. She remembers the lessons that she got from him. It's, I think, a huge credit to the actor that on the TV show, his presence was still felt much later as well. He's one of the great characters that they introduced there. Now, I think that feeds into this feeling that we have that he must have survived. The situation in the books is actually pretty much the same as what happened on the show. So when it all goes wrong for the Starks down in King's Landing, when Ned is captured and they go off hunting down all the rest of the Starks, they kill some of them, they capture some of them, and not just the Stark family, but also anyone connected with the Starks. Meryn Trant and 5 guards come looking for Arya, and she's there with Syrio Forel, and he basically is just like the badass boss that he is, and he tells her to go away. The guards attack him. He manages to disable all 5 guards. Then Meryn Trant attacks him and cuts his wood. He's only got a wooden training sword, so he cuts that, and then Syrio is just left there with just a broken wooden sword, faced with somebody in plate armor with a huge proper metal sword. And at that point, Arya runs away. So we do not see what happens next. Now, obviously, if we do not see what happens, that leaves open all the possibilities. Somebody is not definitely dead unless we see them die. So the possibility is there. But I think we have to go to what George R. R. Martin says on this. He has been asked about this, as you'd expect, on several occasions. And he started out, he said he described what happened, and he said this was a hopeless situation, so draw your own conclusions, which sort of implies that in his mind, Syrio is dead. He said it was a hopeless situation. But over the years, he kept on being asked about it, and he seemed, I was going through So Spake Martin, which is a collection of things that he has said about the world of Ice and Fire over the years, and he seems to get more and more kind of frustrated by these questions, to the point where he keeps on with this, draw your own conclusions, it was a hopeless situation. And then he starts coming out with things like he's not immortal, So in his mind, he clearly is hinting strongly that he is dead. He's never going to say it 100%. He's hinting that he's dead. If he survived, this is my take on this, but if he survived, then what we have to say is that he didn't kill Mirren Trant, which you would think that he would probably have to do. He just knocked him out or something and then ran away. That's the only way that he could have survived, because Mirren Trant survived. He did not kill Mirren Trant. Mirren Trant definitely survived. So if he did survive, if Syrio Forel did survive, he ran away, and there's nothing to suggest that that's what he would do. The first sword of Braavos does not run, so there's no, and we do not see him again. Now, there's only one other sort of little asterisk I'd put to this, which is that we get, I think it's in the Mercy chapter, the pre-release chapter from the Winds of Winter, the Arya chapter, the playwright of the play, she's now undercover working in a playhouse, is someone called Fario Forel. Is this a relation to Syrio Forel? We do not know, but the play appears to be about the events in King's Landing at around that time. So who knows? Maybe this is a brother of Syrio Forel. Maybe this is Syrio Forel who's reinvented himself, gone back to Braavos, but he left Braavos for a reason first time around. Why would he go back there? So the honest answer is we do not have any evidence one way or the other, but if he survived, he ran away, which seemed out of character, and George R. R. Martin has been hinting heavily that he did indeed die. So that's the situation we have there. Question from Duck Crow. Actually, not a question, just saying thanks for being awesome and the amazing content. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. That's very kind. Tyler Evan, have they had any interactions with Lorath or Norvos? Not off the top of my head that I can think of. These are other free cities, sort of for north and eastwards in the north and east of Essos from Braavos, I should probably say. We don't, but that's more because Norvos and Lorath tend not to get engaged in too much extra sort of stuff with the other free cities. So no, there's nothing major there. Karen Thomas saying, Robert, thank you for the quality of your work, for keeping us entertained and sane the past year. Big hugs to you and Dan the dog. Be back tomorrow for subtitles. Thank you so much. That's really kind. Yes, so subtitles, obviously on live streams can't do subtitles. Maybe there's a clever way of doing them. I do not know. But yeah, they should appear tomorrow. If you would like subtitles, they should appear. I try to enable them so they will appear tomorrow. Lance Waltrip, thank you so much, saying, do you think Braavos will become more central to the story beyond Arya's training ground and the Iron Bank? The Navy could alter wars if it gets involved. Yes, it could. Now, I will, if it's Lance, if it's okay with you, I'm going to roll that. I've got a few questions from my patrons which are asking the same. So if it's okay with you, I'm going to wrap this up with that. The Navy, I think I will just quickly say, yes, this is going to be important. So one of my patrons' questions I'll come to lately, it refers to this as Chekhov's navy, which I think is a really interesting way of putting it. As I've said at the top of this, Braavos has been doing stuff secretly, but it's been holding back. It's not been doing anything huge, but we're told again and again, people get shown the arsenal there. They can produce a warship every day. Within a month, they can produce a fleet. Within 2 months, they can double it. This is something which is clearly going to be important, because otherwise, why are you mentioning this? Braavos is clearly central to what's going to be happening. The question is, what do they do with that potential naval power? Now, they will do something. So if it's okay with you, I'm going to wrap up that with some questions I've got coming a little bit later, because I want to build up to that by looking at all the different moving pieces we've got, the sort of build up to it. Michael Pace, thank you so much for the super chat. Didn't see a question attached to that. Just having a quick flick through just to see whether or not it's there. If you did have a particular question, then could you pop it in the chat, and one of the moderators hopefully will be able to pick up on it and flag it for me. Dominic Vaughan saying, hey Robert, can you please see my second question on Patreon on dynamic between Sea Lord and Ironbank and the Faceless Men and Braavos foreign policy? Yes, I have got that one. I will come up to that, so don't worry about that one. I've got that covered, Dominic, as well. Lady Eternal saying, we know that even in real life, children's memories are not always reliable. And George R.R. Martin has clearly stated multiple times that he uses the unreliable narrator trope. So we can't use Dany's memories as proof. We can't even use Viserys' proof. And the because he does lie to Dany, and the marriage pact is a document which no one living can vouch for its legitimacy other than Doran. How do we know that the document wasn't forged to suit Doran's purposes? What evidence do we really have that the house with the red door was in Braavos? Okay, so this is Dany has, I think, about a dozen times she has these memories. So this is not just a throwaway thing that George R. R. Martin has got for us. This is an important part of her psychological makeup, is this idea of the house with the red door. And she mentions it in various different ways. This is a house with a red door with a lemon tree outside. She used to go running through the gardens. There used to be timber with animal faces carved into it. We get lots of different bits of imagery there. She was definitely there with Willem Darry and also with Viserys. Now, she remembers this from when she was young, so up to the age of 6, and that was when she was happy. This is the psychologically important point, is that this is her memory of being, of home, of peace, of happiness, is the house with the red door. Now, she remembers this as Braavos, and people have queried this. I did a whole video on this. If you want all of the evidence, I did a whole video on it. I tend to think that most of the people who query it come down to this fact that there's a lemon tree. Now, the reason why that's a problem for some people is because there's this line that there are no trees in Braavos, because there aren't. It's just this completely built up, closed in kind of place. If you've ever been to Venice, imagine it like that. There aren't lots of trees anywhere. But the sentence finished, except in the courts and the gardens of the rich and powerful. So, to my mind, given that she clearly was wherever she was in the courts of the rich and powerful, then because at the time they were the recently deposed ruling house of Westeros with huge amounts of money. They were not just like slumming it somewhere. This was somewhere rich and powerful. So there's no reason why it shouldn't be Braavos. This idea that Viserys was the only person who told her it was in Braavos, I personally don't also buy. So Willem Darry was alive during that time, and he certainly allowed her to think that it was Braavos at the very least. And why would he lie? There is absolutely no reason for a lie. There's no reason for Viserys to lie about where it is. So I think you have to come up with a convincing reason why. The onus of evidence here is not on proving that this is Braavos, but it proving that this isn't Braavos. You have to have a reason for why Viserys would lie, why Willem Darry would lie. What is the point of pretending where they were? They were moving around all around the Free Cities. She went back at some point, apparently to Braavos at least once. She never seemed to question that this was where she had been previously. As for this marriage pact, this is something that Quentin Martell brought with him and reveals in Dance with Dragons just before she gets married, in fact. And it is a marriage pact that was signed between Viserys and Arianne Martell. So this was tying together the Targaryens and the Martells, and it was signed, witnessed by the Sea Lord of Braavos. So that ties them in with there. If you're going to say, again, I think the onus on proving that that's not legitimate. Why on earth would Doran lie about that? If Braavos discover it, then they would very easily be able to say, but that's not the Sea Lord's signature or whatever. So why on earth would he lie about that? There's no motive for that in any way, shape or form. And I think the final thing I would say is that there's a lot of sort of random anecdotal stuff which just fits. For example, the fact that there are animal faces carved into the wooden beams in Dany's memory. The Sea Lord, if she was in the gardens of the Sea Lord's palace, and they were plentiful, then we know that there's a menagerie there. The Sea Lord has got lots of animals, so that makes sense. That kind of ties in with it. And also the Sea Lord's pleasure barge appears to be painted with lots of faces. Again, that ties in with it. So there are lots of these little clues that sort of just all back it up. To my mind, it's not a matter of how do we make the case for this. It's that this seems to make absolute sense, not just in terms of the bits of anecdotal evidence, but the story as a whole. Where would you go if you were Willem Darry? They head straight across to the Braavosi coast. Where do you go? To the Free Cities? Braavos? Why not Braavos? What would be the point of lying about where they go? That's not a problem at all. That's probably the most secure place for them to go. Because why would the king of Westeros want to be annoying Braavos? We all know what's going on with Braavos. You do not wish to be annoying Braavos. So that is a safe place for them to be. The onus, I think, is on people to disprove it was Braavos, and I don't think anyone has done that yet. Another question. I'm sure I had another question here somewhere. So, yes, the Dominican Stud 101 saying, "Hey, Robert, I recently finished The Hedge Knight, The Sworn Sword, The Mystery Knight. With this, I think I've read all of George R. R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire material. Excellent. Well done. I would... I think that's really good. So, well done. I start it again, or start onto Tolkien if that's the next best way to go. Fletcher Reed, thank you for the super sticker. I think that's a cup of tea. I will happily have that one. Simon of Flynn, thank you, saying the underlying idea behind the lemon tree conspiracy is that Dany isn't Dany, it's a baby swap. Yeah, I mean, again, I I think it has to be proven. Unless there's evidence, and I genuinely, hopefully you know me well enough by now, I will happily, if I discover evidence that suggests that there's something that makes more sense, I will happily change my mind on this, and I am fully ready. You can hold me to this when the Winds of Winter comes, and if I've been opining on something and discover that actually that wasn't quite right, I will happily hold up my hands and say, okay, so we've got new information now. This is now what seems to be going on. But the Danny baby swap thing, I see no actual evidence for it. There's no real hint. If people are suggesting that she's not a Targaryen, well, why does she appear so Targaryen? She's clearly got a dragon bond, that she's getting dragon dreams. She's got some sort of resistance to heat. That she's very Targaryen. So what is the suggestion that's going on there? Where is the evidence that she is not who she claims to be? Why on earth would Viserys be lying about this in any way? So that's where I'm at. JF Pahamatube, thank you so much for the super sticker. Thumbs up there. Question from Shah saying, hi Robert, I hope you're well. I am, thank you very much. My question: since Dany has lived in the Sea Lord's palace and Syrio has served the Sea Lord, are there any indications that those are or are definitely not the same Sea Lord? Excellent question. So Syrio Forel was the first sword of Braavos, which is basically the personal security guard to the Sea Lord. And by the time he enters the story, he's in King's Landing. We do not know how long he's been in King's Landing. Ned found him to be training up Arya. The only bit of information we have is that he was the first sword of Braavos for 9 years, so a reasonable period of time. Dany was in Braavos, and I don't think it was the Sea Lord's palace. My thinking is, trying to pick together all the clues, is that there was a separate house in the gardens of the Sea Lord's palace. George R. R. Martin, if you look, there's a book called The Lands of Ice and Fire. There's a link to it down in the description, incidentally. But there's a book which is maps, which George R. R. Martin has authorized, of all the different places in the world of Ice and Fire. One of them is of Braavos, and the Sea Lord's palace, you can see within that, is not just a palace, but also there's a whole area of gardens. We know that there's a menagerie there, and there is specifically, clearly, some standalone buildings within those gardens. So my take is it's one of those buildings under the protection of the Sea Lord within the palace enclave, so to speak. But to return to Syrio, so he was there for 9 years. Dany was there for 6 years, give or take, as far as we can tell. And given that at the start of the story she was 13, that means that was 7 years ago. So on the assumption that Syrio Forel arrived at some point in the last few years in King's Landing, then yes, he probably was there at that time. Did he know them? I mean, he probably would have seen them, possibly met them. Is that going to have an impact on the story? Not really, is where I'm at. So probably he was. Now, the intriguing thing, and we, as I say, we're building up this picture of Braavos as we go through. The intriguing thing is that with the Sea Lord is not a position for life. This is effectively like a prime minister, and they, when one goes out, another one comes in, and it's incredibly complicated political maneuverings. Often somebody's forcibly ejected from their position, suffering an accident perhaps. So what the implication is that Syrio Forel left when his political master left office. That explains why he is no longer in Braavos, because if for 9 years he was closely associated with a politician who suddenly his party. He himself had been ousted from power in an incredibly cutthroat political situation. It makes sense that Syrio Forel may well have just decided, you know what, I'm now going to step away from Braavos for a bit, because I am firstly connected with that, and also if that Sea Lord was killed, he was the person who was tasked with defending the Sea Lord. So maybe he just, his reputation in Braavos isn't as great as we might think. So this all ties in with the idea, however, with the other bit of information we have about Dany in the house with the red door, which is that it suddenly changed. Willem Darry dies, but then after that, something happens. Suddenly they are no longer welcome. That they get turfed out. The servants steal some of their stuff. They have to leave. What's going on? That kind of feels like, given the fact that they still had some money, they could still afford, if they were renting somewhere, they could carry on doing that. It sounds like they were someone's guests. And then the situation changed. The Sea Lord changed, the politics changed, and suddenly they decided they did not wish to be harboring the exiled king of Westeros. Because for a few years, people probably were thinking, well, maybe the Targaryens will be able to come back. Maybe they will be able to return. Maybe this is a canny political move, and we can be the ones who can say that we looked after Viserys in exile. Then Robert Baratheon gets settled into power. People aren't particularly missing the Targaryens. People start to notice that maybe Viserys isn't the great king that people were hoping he might be. Actually, we don't particularly want to be harboring the Targaryens anymore. Change of political power, and they get pushed out. So that seems to be what's happening again. This is just taking the hints that we're getting from what happened. We haven't got all of the evidence on this one yet. Jewel Elson, thank you so much for the super sticker saying GG. I'm not entirely sure what that little creature is. I mean, it looks like is that a radio with legs? I'm not entirely sure what's going on there, but thank you. I really appreciate it. I love these little super stickers. They always confuse me, but thank you. Jedi Spartan 42, thank you so much, saying, love both the channels. I started reading Game of Thrones because of you. Oh, that really that thrills me. It really does. Listening while conditioning my shins after sparring. Who did you hate more, Joff or Ramsay? Conditioning your shins after sparring. Wow, this is added to my list of things that people do while they're listening. Who did I hate more, Joffrey or Ramsay? I think Ramsay. I mean, Ramsay's still going in the books, obviously. Joffrey just seems to be someone who he was just brought up. I mean, he was still a child, effectively, still young. He was brought up entitled in a horrible place, and I mean, I can't say that I have any sympathy for him as a character, but Ramsay he had a lot more chance. He's made more decisions to be who he is, rather than Joffrey, where it's just that's what he was born into. So yeah, but they're neither are nice, are they? Question from Sir Bobbert Ross saying, actually, Shah, did I answer that? Whether there's indications that I don't think I actually talked around this, but I don't think I actually finally answered it. Are there indications that those are definitely not the same Sea Lord, the one that Syrio served and the one that was there with Dany? No definitive evidence, but the timings seem to work for that to be the case, that he was the first sword for the Sea Lord that was protecting Viserys and Dany. So Robert Ross saying, greetings, Robert, from sunny Quebec. Hi there, Quebec. What is the relationship between the Faceless Men and the nobles in Braavos, like the Keyholders and Sea Lords? I know there's a theory that the first sword is meant to protect the Sea Lord by seeing through Faceless Men glamours. Okay, so now we're getting into the how do these things interact one with another. The way that the Faceless Men describe themselves to Arya is that they came first. They were before Braavos, so their foundation was in the mines of old Valyria, beneath Valyria itself. And they came with the slaves at some point, and they forged their home there in Braavos. So that's their long history, is that they came from there originally. So they started up. The establishment, the Sea Lord and the Iron Bank are the establishment of Braavos. Now, the relationship then between the Faceless Men and the nobles of Braavos is that the Faceless Men are, on one level, they're one of the many religions that there are in Braavos. Because Braavos is this hugely cosmopolitan city, it has slaves from, or freed slaves from all over the world. They brought their religions there. You will find almost every single kind of religion. They've got a temple. And the Isle of the Gods has got loads of these different temples going on there. It is one of many. However, it is effectively a Braavosi religion, and it serves a purpose. The first purpose is being effectively a euthanasia clinic, but also it has this role as being the hired assassins. Now, you can hire an assassin, and the price of who you're trying to assassinate varies. The price varies according to who you're trying to assassinate and what you can afford. So everyone in Braavos theoretically can hire the Faceless Men to be doing whatever killing they want them to be doing. The Lords seem to use them, from what we can see, for precision murders around politics, in order to be changing the guard of the Sea Lord, the political dynamic of what is going on in Braavos. So that is the connection. They are separate entities, but they are used by the Lords within Braavos, and it's the connection is close. They're not owned, they don't do the bidding, but the connection is close, to the extent that they can be used as a threat by the city. Effectively, the Faceless Men are used as a threat by the city. They are, in Fire and Blood, when Jaehaerys goes over, or sends Septon Bath over to negotiate to try and get back the 3 dragon eggs that Alyssa Farman stole. And basically, the conversation goes, Septon Bath says, we could send dragons over and burn your city to the ground. And the Sea Lord goes, yes, you could, but we have assassins here, and these assassins would go off and kill everyone that you love, and every member of the Targaryen family. So they are confident, and it's almost like they have them on retainer. For the city as a whole. That's the sort of relationship they seem to have. They don't own them, but they are independent, but they sort of seem to have them on retainer. Reflective Rambling saying, I'm not entirely sure what is going on there. My general state of being. Yeah, it's often mine. Kissy Teeny, thank you so much for the super chat, saying, first time catching a live stream. I've worked all kinds of odd hours the past year, so you have kept me company while dissecting patient specimens. Wow, that's another amazing thing to add to the list of what people are doing. Dissecting patient specimens. I'm not going to ask too many questions, but that does perhaps fit in quite well with us talking about the Faceless Men. Question from Dominic Vaughan. How much interaction, I think this was the question you were asking me to pick up. How much interaction do you think there is between the Sea Lord, the Faceless Men, and the Iron Bank? Obviously, the Sea Lord is the nominal head of the Free City, but he has two very autonomous power institutions running parallel to him. Do you think this is a relationship of separate spheres of influence, or do you see them interacting and collaborating on Braavos foreign policy, etc.? Okay, so I've talked about the interrelationship between the Faceless Men and sort of the political powers that be. The Iron Bank was founded by some of the first slaves who arrived there. They needed a place to keep their money, and so they found a mine, and then they sort of hired some people to look after it, and then a few people thought, oh well, we've all put lots of money here into this mine, why don't we lend it to some people? And that sort of built up from that. The stakeholders in the Iron Bank are effectively all of the powerful and mighty and rich within Braavos. That is the way it works. So if you are looking for an expression of who is Braavos, who is looking after the interests of Braavos, it is the Iron Bank. It's actually not so much the Sea Lord. The Sea Lord is a political post. It shifts about. They have one view of what's going on what they should be doing, then that Sea Lord goes, another one comes in, they've got a slightly different view. The Iron Bank will be effectively a collective view of all of these key holders. They're called the people who were, they often carry the huge key around their neck to show that they're a key holder to the Iron Bank of Braavos. So that's the sort of the connection. It is, it's like the state bank, but it's not so much holding the state's money. It probably does hold the state's money as well, but it holds the money of the people within Braavos, and that therefore is the main instrument of the Braavosi influence across the wider world. I talked earlier about the fact they don't have a standing army. They don't need to, because what they can do is they can hire whoever they want to do whatever they want. They can get sellsword companies because they've got the money. And this is the way that they are influencing things, is through the Iron Bank. So that's the way that these three things, it's not just three powers within Braavos that are sort of equal and sort of sometimes weight shifts one way or another. There is the Iron Bank are the center. Effectively, everybody has got some kind of, it's like stakeholder bank, effectively. The Sea Lord and the politicians, that is very much a political thing and can shift around. The Faceless Men are independent, but effectively the state have them on retainer. Lawnduck 20 saying, hi Robert, cheers to you and Dan. My question is, do you see the Faceless Men getting angry with Arya after killing Raph the Sweetling? This is now the second person she's killed without their consent. Yes. So they will not like this. The question is whether they find out. And they probably will. But when I don't think we're going, I don't think that's something we can answer until we see the Winds of Winter. So what's basically this was in the Mercy, the pre-release chapter from the Winds of Winter. So Arya is there in sort of undercover as this character called Mercy in this theatre troupe with the playhouse, and while she's there just sort of running errands, then she notices that one of the guards who has come with a retinue from King's Landing is this guy called Raph the Sweetling, who is on her list for killing Lomi, her friend. And she then effectively seduces him, brings him back to her place and kills him. Then she disposes of the body. Now, I think the most likely chain of events is that the Faceless Men then do discover this, and this is the thing which precipitates her leaving. Now, I do not know whether that is going to happen straight away or whether we're going to have another couple of chapters of her trying to hide what she did. There's no hint at the moment that the Faceless Men know this, that they know that she did this, but they do seem to have ways of discovering stuff. So yes, they're going to be angry. She should not just be killing people. They're going to be angry on two levels, because she shouldn't be just randomly killing people. It should be because she's been told to kill people, and secondly, because this was somebody that Arya Stark wanted killed, and she is trying to be no one. She is trying to leave behind her Starkish identity. So that is the second reason why they will be angry with her. Jordan Walker. What is the Iron Bank's true motivation? Their policy of hemorrhaging gold on one contender then another seems unwise at best. I've heard people mention that they are potentially in league with Littlefinger, so maybe they also believe in the chaos as a ladder way of thinking. There must be some political machinations here. Thanks for the great content. Well, you're welcome. So what is their true motivation? The true motivation is to retain Braavos's safety and security and influence around the world. That is their main aim. Now, the way that they will do that is by trying to ensure that whoever is in power is owes them or fears them or something along those lines. So that is the main aim. Yes, they have lent a lot of money to the Iron Throne, and now they're lending a lot of money to somebody else who claims the Iron Throne, being Stannis, which seems like it's just they're throwing out money all over the place. They have got a lot of money, so it's not like this is just a random, just giving money out. They can afford this. Crucially, what is going to happen is that they will get to the point that this is how they see this happening, forgetting what we think is going to happen in the story going forward. What they see as happening is that eventually someone is going to be sitting on the Iron Throne, and that person, they are going to come to them and say, you now owe us all of this that the Iron Throne previously owed us, plus this amount that Stannis owed us. You owe all of this money. And if they protest, that's when they can start pushing their weight around. That's when they can start producing a big navy. That's when they can start producing the Faceless Men. And they come up with some sort of plan. So that is what is that's what the plan is. They want whoever the new person sitting on the Iron Throne to be in debt to them. And they're very happy with that. And as it stands, yes, the Iron Throne is in debt to the Iron Throne is in debt to the Iron Bank. Stannis is in debt to the Iron Bank, or will be once the agreement makes its way back to Braavos. But if all of that debt is consolidated, then that is a huge amount of debt. That is the kind that actually could mean that the Iron Throne has to do things that the Iron Bank want, thereby securing the safety and security of Braavos. So that's the overall plan. This idea that they're potentially in league with Littlefinger, this comes from the fact that Littlefinger's family originally comes from Braavos a couple of generations ago. And indeed, the Baelish sigil is the Titan of Braavos. So he changed it. So cutting off the link to Braavos. But are they in league? I tend not to think that they are. I don't think that they're a chaos is a ladder kind of organization. They seem incredibly methodical and working things through. So I don't think that they're just trying to create chaos and hope that they're going to be able to benefit from it. Littlefinger, however, I think is incredibly aware of all of this. So this is how I think this ties in. It's not that he's in cahoots with them somehow, but I think that he will see opportunities. Littlefinger is on a huge money-making scam at the moment. We're starting to see a few hints of it. It's his grain storage plan, which sounds incredibly dull, and everyone will think it's incredibly dull. But what he's been doing is he's been storing up huge amounts of grain in the Vale and then not selling it. And he knows that as winter comes in and as things get worse in the Seven Kingdoms, the price of that grain is going to go up and up and up as people need it more and more. And so that's his plan. And then he is going to get stupidly rich from this. This, I think, will help him as he's going up to I'm sure this idea will come to him at some point. Comes up to Stannis. Stannis owes money to the Iron Bank. He can team up. Is the way he will see this. He can team up, get Sansa into being the Lady of Winterfell. He can be in charge there, and also this is how he will see it, obviously, there and in the Vale, and perhaps possibly even down into the Riverlands, given her links there. And because he can offer to be paying off Stannis's debt, because he's got all of this money, and he can effectively buy himself into influence. So that, I think, is his long-term gain with all of this. I don't think that he's in cahoots, but I think that he's very aware of how they operate. Let's have a quick drink. Eric Ferg, who does the Iron Bank back after Stannis dies? Where does the Iron Bank stand at the end of the book? This is a hard one. I'll be honest. A lot of the time, when people ask these kind of questions, that in most of these ones, looking at the different areas, people have asked, where does such and such a place stand at the end of it all? I think this is quite hard. I think, indisputably, I suspect Braavos will survive. I think it will be there. The Iron Bank will survive. The Sea Lord, or the Faceless Men, they're all going to get through this. I don't see any problem with that at all. The Iron Bank will end up in a situation where somebody is sitting on the Iron Throne, and they will consider that person owes them a huge amount of money, unless it has been paid off at some point, which maybe the Stannis bit will be. I suspect Littlefinger will just offer to do it rather than actually do it. But the Iron Bank will do that. And then what I think we're going to be left with is a standoff. Do the new powers that be, whoever they are, agree to pay off, cripple the debt, agree to take it on? If they do agree to take it on, then the whole thing will just go away. If they don't, then the Iron Bank will start. This is where the Navy might come in and start potentially even trying to blockade the Seven Kingdoms. So where will it all end up? I suspect the way that the George R. R. Martin wrote the thing I talked about a moment ago, when Jaehaerys and the Sea Lord were effectively in negotiations, was they are willing to negotiate over this. They're willing to cancel debts. They're willing to think of ways around this to ensure their safety. Now, if someone like Bran is in charge, if they have seen the magic that's going on in Westeros, then they may well get to the point where they can come to an agreement of peaceful coexistence, because their aim within Braavos, as the Iron Bank, is not to be ruling the world. They are there as a trading nation, effectively. They are there wanting to make sure that they can free slaves. They're wanting to be making sure that they can keep their people rich and happy. That is what they are about. And if they can come to some sort of arrangement that allows that to carry on, they will consider that to be a win. So I suspect where all of this is going to end up is some stuff's going to be paid back. The Iron Bank are going to cut some deal with whoever's there at the end, and it'll all settle down. That does not mean that there's nothing to this Braavos storyline. We'll pick out a few elements in a moment where I think they are going to come and be important. But that, I think, is the end game, is that it will all settle down because they do not want war. That is not what they like. They want trading. They want peace. Connected to this, Eric Ferg saying, what happens to Harris Swift's contingent in the light of Raph's murder and due to the fact the Iron Bank is backing Stannis? What does Cersei do if Harris returns empty-handed? So Harris Swift is the guy who's leading this contingent from Cersei to the Iron Bank to try and negotiate. I suspect that they will go back empty-handed. I think that they may or may not discover Raph the Sweetling. Arya's basically just dumping the body in a canal. They may find this, they may not. They may interpret this as being threatening behavior. They may not. But the plot point is that they go back to King's Landing, to Cersei, and say, we're not getting out of this debt. That's not happening. They want us to pay. The Iron Bank have run out of patience with Cersei, with the Lannisters at this point. So it's only if the Lannisters suddenly get extra money. This, I think, is going to tie in with what happens with Cersei. So she and the iteration of events is going to be important here. If they come back before she does what she will do with probably blowing up the Great Sept and taking on the Tyrells, this may be another thing that actually pushes her that way, because she'll be thinking, how do I not only get rid of the High Sparrow, Marjorie, but how do I get the money I need to be paying back the Iron Bank? Well, the Tyrells have got money. I'll get it from them. So maybe that's going to be another thing which factors in. Maybe this is going to be after that. And what is almost certainly going to be happening with Cersei is that she's going to an extent, she's going to be echoing Rhaenyra, the queen in the Dance of the Dragons, who was ruled for 6 months. But she... everything went wrong in that 6 months. They ran out of money. The people were against her. There were riots. I think this is the echo of this is going to be felt with Cersei. I think that the people will turn against her even more, particularly if she does something like blow up the Great Sept, which is going to kill lots of innocent people. I think that we're going to start seeing the fact that there may even be a siege going on. I think that she's going to suddenly realize that she has to get extra money. Maybe she's going to have to raise taxes. That will turn the people against her. She will have to get out eventually. That is the only answer to it. So the exact iteration of events will impact on how this plays out, but it's going to feed into the storyline that Cersei is going to alienate herself. She's going vis-a-vis the citizens of King's Landing. The Fagon is going to arrive, be this wonderful savior for them in their eyes, and she's going to have to escape. That is how this is going to feed in. Question from Meme saying Braavos is the only free city where slavery is illegal. Yet, although it is technically illegal in Pentos, but they get around it with sort of indentured servants and things like that. So that's the Pentos is a sort of they do have it, and at some point Braavos will turn their attention back to that. Average Nerd Yen Valor saying, "Hey Robert, during the show and the books, there are multiple times that fear of the Iron Bank was expressed. What are the consequences of breaking a loan with them? Is it just that they will finance the enemies of those who break it, or would be more likely would they hire faceless men? Would love to hear your thoughts on it." Yeah, so either or both. That's the way that this will go. The general iteration of events is that they lend some money. If it doesn't come back, then they try and negotiate a way for the money to keep flowing, maybe the different payment profile or whatever. If that doesn't work, then they will replace whoever owes them money and put in someone who will accept it. So they will start sponsoring someone who is opposed to it. So this is what seems to be happening with Stannis. Is the idea is that the Lannisters aren't paying the debt. They don't seem to be able to repay the debt. Therefore, they're going to support Stannis to be the new king of Westeros, and he is going to take on the debt, and then he will pay them. That is the way that they go. If he will not, then they will back somebody else. So that's the way they seem to go. The Faceless Men are possible as a sort of a backup. They could just murder someone if they think that that's the easiest way to do it, but they would prefer pretty much all the time to be doing something that gets the money back. So as it stands, they are still owed money by Cersei, by the Lannisters. They are then going to be owed extra money by Stannis. That, if Stannis did win, say, he would then owe them all of that money. If they didn't do that, if they just assassinated Cersei, then they would have to pay for the Faceless Men, and whoever took over wouldn't necessarily want to be repaying. So their business model is that they never forget the debt. Someone always owes them that amount of money, and they will get it back, and they will put someone into place who will pay them. So that is how they intend to go about it. The Greasy Strangler saying, "Hi Robert, 7 blessings to you and all of your listeners. I have an open question around the Titan of Braavos and the myths and legends that it would come to life and protect the Braavos Sea during attacks on the city. Can you tell us a bit more about him, his origins, and any cool stories you think are relevant?" Yes, very happy to. So the Titan of Braavos is, we saw it on the show, it's described very clearly in the books. It's the entrance to the lagoon of Braavos. So basically, you get this islands that go all the way around the outside of this lagoon, big high pine trees, effectively high hills, mountains all the way around it, one way in. Bestriding those 2 islands, there is this huge statue, the Titan of Braavos. At the bottom, it's made out of stone. At the top, it's made out of bronze. So every ship has to sail effectively through its legs. That's the way into Braavos and the way out of Braavos. Now, this has a number of purposes. Firstly, it looks really cool. This is a statement, an announcement. This is Braavos. This is what we can do. This is impressive. Secondly, this is an early warning function, is that whenever a ship goes through, this horn sounds that can be heard right across Braavos, so you know that a ship is coming in. It's also a lighthouse. There are lights behind its eyes which can help guide people in. It's also a way of telling the time. As well as when the ship comes in, then also at certain times during the day, on the hour, then it sort of the sound reverberates across Braavos. And it's also a defensive mechanism. There are murder holes, there are arrow slits. It's hollow inside, so if anyone does try and sail in to attack Braavos, then it's the equivalent of a gatehouse on a castle. This is very hard to get through without your ship being seriously damaged. So it has all of these different functions. in terms of the history of it, we don't know huge amounts. It was built presumably as a statement. The history of Braavos is that it started out as the secret city. They didn't tell anyone about it. When slaves landed, they colonized these islands. They set up the city. They didn't tell anyone who was there, and it was secret for a long time. And then the unmasking or the unveiling happened, and they announced themselves to the world. It was still secret. They said, we exist, but they didn't tell anyone where they were for another 300 years, I think. And then they said, this is where we are. Now, I think at that point, that has to be when the Titan of Braavos was built, as an announcement of where Braavos is, because before then they did not want people to know where they were. Now, the whole idea was that this was secret. It was hidden behind these islands around the outside of the lagoon, the big pine trees, huge high pine trees, the mists and all the rest of it. That would have been completely undermined if they built a whopping great big statue, and it is a whopping great big statue. It's 300 feet high, something along those lines. Says that she thinks that it could step over Winterfell's outer walls. That's how big it is. So it is massive, and so it's not as old as Braavos itself, it would appear, but it is a statement by them on announcing their, and apparently this took generations to do, on announcing that they exist. Andrew K, yes, literally and figuratively emerged from the fog. That's the idea. So once they wanted people to know where they were, then they created this huge statue, as it were. Connected to this, Justin Thompson says, how did the Titan break his sword? So the Titan is standing there, one hand grabbing hold of the rocks and the other holding up a broken sword. Now, there are two options here, broadly. One, I think, unlikely, and one which has a lot of unanswered questions attached to it. The one that I think is unlikely is that it was built with a full sword, but then at some point along the way, a high wind or whatever, it broke off, and they just didn't repair it. Personally, I think that's unlikely, because we don't hear of any stories about how when the Titan's sword was broken off, that doesn't come down to us. And having gone to the great expense of and time of building this thing, as I say, it was over generations. We're told 3 generations of stonemasons built the bottom bit of it. Having gone to that great expense, to just go, oh well, so the swords come off, that doesn't kind of hang right. It'd be like the Statue of Liberty, if the arm fell off, people going, well, all right, fine. Well, it doesn't matter, we'll just keep it as it is now. That's not the way that this seems to work. So the other possibility is that it was deliberately built like that. It was deliberately built with a broken sword. Now, we are not told why. There's nowhere. So when we say I said that there are unanswered questions there. There are possibilities attached to this. There is a link across to the Second Sons, Sellsword Company. Their sigil is a broken sword. George R. R. Martin often uses this symbolism of broken swords. He does obviously borrow this from Tolkien. It didn't start with Tolkien, but it was a very much a clear sort of thing to borrow, the sword that was broken. And George R. R. Martin has said the thing about broken swords is that they can be remade. Now, I think, leaving aside everything else, the kind of implication here is that this is trying to show us the character of Braavos. This is this huge, mighty warrior figure, but with a broken sword. It is not it's not attempting to go to war. That's not the idea. It is not there to fight. It has rejected the way of the Valyrian freehold. It has decided not to have a standing army. This is the city-state which is most focused on trade, on diplomacy, on getting things done without wars wherever possible. They will do that when they need to, but that's not the first recourse of the Braavosi. So that seems to be, it's like breaking the shackles. It's like saying this is what we're about, or what we're not about, more to the point. So that seems to be the main point, as far as we can tell, unless, or lack of point, as the case may be with a broken sword. But there might be, I think we should hold out for there being another reason we just have not been told yet. The broken sword is noted but not remarked upon, which is an interesting state of affairs. So it would not surprise me if in the next book, say, because we are still going to have chapters in Braavos, we find out a little bit more. The Greasy Strangler, you said you are asking about also stories. We do get one story. Old Nan told a story, Arya remembers it as she's going through, about when Braavos was in danger, then the Titan would wake with fire in his eyes and wade into the sea to smash the enemies. This is a fantastic idea. It's clearly wrong, as in it's not literally what happens, but it tells us a lot, and it operates, I think, on a number of different levels. The first one is that we should not rush to say everything that Old Nan says is literally true. I think that's a temptation that a lot of us have, because a lot of her stories about the others and all the rest of it, everyone scoffs at, but are seemingly true. Here, this is clearly not true. So we shouldn't take everything she says as absolute gospel truth. That's, I think, the first thing we have to draw from this. Second, this is, I think, showing us, George R. R. Martin showing us how stories and legends have elements of truth to them, but that the exact truth gets lost over time. So with fire in his eyes, yes, the Titan Braavos does have fire in his eyes, because that's where they light fires behind them as this sort of lighthouse. That's the way that it operates. Does it wade out to make war on the city's enemies? No, but it is a way that they make war on their enemies, because it is used as this gatehouse that they can fire down on any enemies that come through. So this is just turning bits of truth and making them into sort of legends and myths, and that is him almost giving us a hint to the fact that we shouldn't take all of the stories from even longer ago and say that we're told and say they are exactly right. We shouldn't take the stories of Bran the Builder and say, well, that's exactly what happened. These are myths, these are legends. They are based on truths, but they are not 100% truth. So this is George R. R. Martin giving us a concrete example, or a stone and bronze example, of what that actually means. The way that connecting it in with an Old Nan story is really good way of doing that. Finally, I would say that there's another element of symbolism here. I have done, you've probably seen it, I did a video a while ago on the stone statues of Winterfell in the Winterfell crypts, and how I think they will come to life. There's so much in language in the Winterfell crypts around this. I've lost track of it. Someday I will count all the different references to the Kings of Winter statues being anthropomorphized, being made to feel human, the way that they're moving, people are dreaming about them, hearing them, all the different things. But George R. R. Martin has got this idea of statues coming to life across his world. It's here. There's a legend of a statue coming to life. It's the Stone Men over in Essos, further deep into Essos, Troyrain. It's the legend of Azor Ahai with that Melisandre goes to Dragonstone because bringing stone dragons to flesh. These legends, these rumors, these stories, they are going to build up to something. We are going to have statues coming to life somewhere in this story in the last couple of books. I think that's going to be in the Winterfell crypts, and I think this is just one of those other things that are pushing us towards that little extra layers of foreshadowing that we've got going on. Question from Dominican Stud 101. What is Dany's culture? Westerosi or Essosi? The books don't do a good job making it obvious. Do we know the languages she speaks? Her best one. Well, she speaks at least 3 languages. She speaks High Valyrian. She speaks the languages over in I can't remember. Perhaps people will be able to help me. She obviously speaks Dothraki, but she can also speak over in Slaver's Bay. So she is multilingual in terms of her culture. George R. R. Martin. I think he explains it reasonably well in that she doesn't feel at home. This is why home, the house with the red door, is so important to her. A place of peace, a place of home. She doesn't actually have a home anywhere. And what I mean by that is that she was born on Dragon's Day. She has never stepped foot, at this point in the story, she's never stepped foot on mainland Westeros. And yet her entire life she's been told that is her homeland. That is where she was born to rule. Well, Viserys never told her that. He said he was born to rule. But they were, the Targaryens were born to rule Westeros. So she's been built with this idea that that is her homeland. And yet all the way through this, she's learning about it. Book learning. She gets people like Ser Jorah telling her things about it. She has elements of the culture, so to speak, but this is book learning of the culture. She actively does not know what it is like. Her culture then, or how she grew up then for the first 13 years of her life, was in the free cities, in this kind of nomadic lifestyle, in a culture effectively of her own. She was brought up in the way of the Targaryens, which was a culture within a culture in Westeros, and then that had to adapt to what was going on in Essos. Then she firmly embraces, I'm rereading or re-listening at the moment through A Game of Thrones. If you're interested in my thoughts on that, check me out on Twitter. Every few days I do another chapter, just my thoughts on that. It's very clear that she is actively embracing the Dothraki culture. She's enjoying riding. She sees the Dothraki see the grasses are beautiful. She is engaging with the culture. That then at this point becomes her culture. Then when if you sort of fast forward all the way around to Meereen, she deliberately, and George R. R. Martin writes it as this culture clash, in that she is trying to engage with this culture. She's wearing what the nobles there wear. She is getting rid of some of the symbols of her Targaryenishness, putting dragons in the or penning them up so people can't see them. Is she going to engage with the culture, with the fighting pits? That whole section is her grappling with this. Where is she going to give next? And on all the rest of it, to the point where it snaps. And it snaps in the last couple of chapters of Dany's chapters in A Dance with Dragons. And that's the point at which she gets this voice coming in her head, which is she's had this again and again. This is Quaithe. Remember who you are. The dragons know who you are. Do you? Fire and blood. This is regaining her Targaryen heritage, which she's never actually grown up in. So the thing about Dany is that and I think it's a really interesting and insightful question, is that when we're talking about her culture, she comes from a people who hark back to a culture, the Valyrian culture, which is gone. She has never had a home culture. She embraces different bits of different cultures. When she finally makes it to Westeros, she will not, I am absolutely certain, she will not feel like it is a homecoming. Dragonstone may be, but the mainland of Westeros, that's not what she knows. So her culture is something that George R. R. Martin has played with all through this story. Question from Jewel Elson, thank you so much, saying, did Illyrio Mopatis become a Bravo in Braavos before meeting and befriending Varys back in Pentos as a youngster? I don't know all of the detail. He was definitely in Pentos as a sort, and I think he was called a Bravo. They do have them in Pentos as well, but he was a sword for hire and a good one. And that's where he met Varys. So maybe someone will be able in the chat will have the precise information whether he was at Braavos, but no, his base is very much has always been Pentos. Oh yeah, people talk about the broken swords. This is interesting, is that yes, Mike Hall saying Azor Ahai's sword broke twice, and there's also other instances of broken swords. Obviously, we get the reforged ice, the sword reforged. Going back to Syrio Forel, if you just stop for one moment, when we last see him, he is standing there as this protector of Braavos. He is protecting Arya, and he is standing there with a broken sword. He is, at that moment, he is mirroring the Titan of Braavos. He is the person who is protecting her with a broken sword. So that is, again, another layer that George R. R. Martin has just dropped in here. He is just symbolically being Braavos at that point, which obviously gives a sort of a hint to where she will end up, because Braavos will shelter her. And Carl Karsnark, yes, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hawks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. Yeah, that's from Isaiah, but I think this was the feel that I was trying to get for Braavos. They don't turn their back on war completely by a long stretch of the imagination, but I think the fact that it is a broken sword is a powerful symbol. Question from Tyler Evan. How does its politics work? Is the Sea Lord absolute? So is his power absolute? So he's well, we are not told all of the ins and outs of Braavos. We should be clear. We're not told all of the ins and outs of Braavosi politics, because what we see of Braavos is from 3 different places or 4 different places. We get the maesters talking about it in rather bland terms in things like the World of Ice and Fire. We get the outsider perspective who are going in and trying to negotiate with them, like in Fire and Blood, where we see Septon Bath go in. We get the Arya, who's within the circle of the Faceless Men and listens to things on the outside. And so we see rumors and we hear things, but not actually in the world of power, and we also get people like Sam as well. So we never actually get an insight, a POV from somebody in the inner circle. So we do not have that exact information, but it appears that the Sea Lord sets the certainly the overseas policy of Braavos. They seem to be the person who is in charge, ceremonially in charge in the city. A lot of how the city is run seems to be run by lots of different areas. What's going on? Obviously, we've got the Iron Bank and all the rest of it, but in terms of how it operates with the outside world, which is a large part of the raison d'etre of Braavos, that is what the Sea Lord is in charge of. The clue is in the name. They are the Sea Lord. They're not the Landlord. They're the Sea Lord in charge of the dealings out in the wider world. They seem to be like a prime minister. They don't seem to have complete control. There is an equivalent of a parliament, and lots of sort of political maneuverings going on there. We do not see inside it. Aya goes past it on a boat, but that's about it. So we haven't got all the information. And this, I think I get a question from someone a bit later, one of my patrons, asking about something along these lines. I would love, and when they keep on announcing all of these different possible spin-offs of A Song of Ice and Fire, the one I would love more than anything else is something to do with Braavos and the politics. And it will feel like the Venetian or Florence, the Medicis, that kind of complicated political maneuverings, deadly power games between different people. I think it'll be absolutely fantastic stuff. So that if not that they ever will, but if HBO ever asked me, that would be what I would say for my own personal favourite spin-off, something in Braavos set around the world of politics. Question from Reflective Rambling. So, you're doing it again, Reflective Rambling. Thank you so much. Picking up a question from someone else. Caroline Schween, how important do you think the power vacuum developing in Braavos is? Who is Tormo Freygar? Okay, so first of all, thank you for picking up a question from someone else. I hugely appreciate that. I try to pick up as much as I can as I go through, but I'd be here all day if I answered everything, and the ones that stand out are obviously the ones that are the super chats. So thank you very much, first of all. Secondly, the power vacuum. So what seems to be going on? And again, we're just picking this up from people like Aya, a little bit from Sam. They're just hearing things and rumors, and clearly the Faceless Men are trying to keep up with what's happening, which is why they're sending out Arya to be collecting bits of information. The Sea Lord appears to be unwell, the current Sea Lord, and she hears so this I always forget his name, Tormo Freygar appears to be the favorite to take over. We don't know much more because we don't know the politics, because we only just hear the rumors about what's going on. Now, the clear implications of all of this is that the Sea Lord is unwell. He will get deposed, and this will change the political stance of Braavos. Now, the important point, and this starts to tie back in, I said that this would all start tying together when we get there, is the important point is that the Sea Lord is in charge of overseas policy as much as anything else. Yes, he seems to have power within Braavos as well, but it's overseas policy. And Braavos at this point has not been doing anything overt out in the world. Now, if people are trying to oust him, that seems to imply that there are some people who think that Braavos should be doing something in the world. And it's easy to see why. Because everything is happening. Absolutely everything is happening. We focusing in on what's happening on Westeros. Westeros has been tearing itself apart in the Civil War for half a decade so far. And over in the far east, over in Slaver's Bay, suddenly the dragons have returned, and the dragons with a dragon rider, it would appear now. And what is happening there? They will be uncertain about this because Daenerys seems to be freeing slaves, which is great, but at the same time, dragons are a huge problem for them. They do not want dragons around. This is why they happily had the dragon eggs in the first place, because they wanted to be able to protect themselves from the dragons. The Targaryens in Westeros, they weren't slavers, so the Braavosi didn't have anything against them on that level, and that seems to be the case again with Daenerys. But Braavos did not want them to have the power to do what they want, which is what could happen if they had loads of dragons. And so suddenly they will feel under threat again. And so this is what they seem to be having this power struggle within Braavos about, is how do they deal with this? Added to all of that, you get this other person who claims to be a Targaryen, Fagon, who's starting to launch this attack. What are they going to do? This is going to ruin trade to start with. All of the trade in Westeros will have been stopped. This is not doing good for them for business. So they will, and they need to deal with Daenerys one way or another. They will want to get rid of the dragons one way or another. And if the policy has been for the last while to just sit back and not do much, particularly if this person, the reigning Sea Lord, is actually unwell, therefore maybe hasn't got the drive to go out and do lots of things, then it makes sense that people might wish to change that. And then Braavos will play a more active role in, firstly, re-establishing the trading routes up and down the narrow sea. They need to make sure that they can control the stepstones, but also facing and coming up with a policy decision about what to do about Dany, because it's not an easy decision. So I hope that sort of answers that. And we don't have the details on the exact politics, but this does seem to be a reaction against the fact that there's huge amounts going on and Braavos has not been doing things. Lolly Gamebel saying dragons feels like an allegory for nukes. Yes, absolutely. This is why they wanted dragon eggs in the first place. And there's the hint, just the hint possibly, that the Faceless Men were paid by Euron with a dragon egg. They are trying to get dragon eggs. This is what they did before when they were feeling under threat from dragons, and now suddenly their dragons returning, they're going to try and get a dragon egg. This is what is suggested, that the price for killing a king would clearly be very high. Euron claims that he once had a dragon egg, but he threw it over the side of his ship. That doesn't sound likely, even for someone like Euron. He will have known the value of that. And if he knew that Braavos would be willing to, the Faceless Men would be willing to accept that as the price of killing Balon Greyjoy, then he would probably have done that, thinking that, the dragon could, even if it's hatched, he has Dragonbinder, so he's absolutely fine with that. So that, I think, is probably what's going on. With all of that, Ariel Winchester, I think I've largely, I think I've sort of answered this one. So saying, hello, Robert, thank you for all your amazing content. What role do you think Braavos will play in either the upcoming wars in Westeros, the wars for King's Landing and War Against the Long Night? And will Braavos have any significance in the ending of the story? So I think where I can say this might be starting to tie together is with the Faceless Men. Now, the Faceless Men, I've got more questions on this, so I'm not going to elaborate on this too much at the moment. But the Faceless Men, they are also not wanting to sit back and just let things happen. We've seen that they are doing things. We've seen that they are moving. We get Jack and Hagar, who has gone down to Old Town. He seems to be investigating something. What's going on? He's pretending he's disguised as someone called Pate, getting away into, it would appear, try to find some books, some knowledge in Old Town. What is there? Well, there is this book called The Death of Dragons. How do you kill dragons? I suspect that this is where we're going to find Braavos as a whole. All of the bits of Braavos that I've talked about will have this shared interest. They will wish to oppose the others. Obviously, they will. But I don't think they're going to have a huge role in that fight. But also they'll wish to oppose the dragons, because the dragons have historically been the enemies of Braavos. So I think that is where they're going to get involved. They are providing the finance to effectively allow all these battles to be happening. That is their main and biggest role. But I think that they will also start to be negotiating with all of these new possible kings and queens. Fagon, Dany, they will have to start engaging with all of them. Question from Catherine Furseth. Hi, Robert. Best wishes for you and Dan. I hope you can say a little bit about the combination of ebony and weirwood on the door of the House of Black and White. What is the history of this combination? Which can be found at some curious places in Essos and Westeros? What is the symbolism other than the obvious contrast of black and white? What narrative purpose does it serve? Okay, so this another fascinating question. Love it. So the House of Black and White doors. They are weirwood and ebony. Now we see this is repeated again, actually, incidentally, further on down when Arya gets sort of down into the bowels of it. There are some chairs there where they have their council meeting. They'll also have got that same black and white weirwood and ebony colouring. The doors of the House of the Undying similarly have this combination, and the doors of Tobbo Mott's blacksmithery, if that's a word, his smithy in King's Landing, also have this strange combination. So this isn't just, I suspect, a coincidence. George R. Martin didn't just think it's cool. Part of it is, yes, it does look cool, and it's a showy offy kind of thing. This is incredibly expensive and hard to do. They are very hard wearing materials, so they look good. They're very practical as well. So there are those kind of things. But what is George R. R. Martin trying to show us with this? Well, I think we need to break down what is it that these doors are hiding, or what is behind them in some way. The House of the Undying, obviously, a very magical place. There's a lot going on there. The House of Black and White, again, a very magical place. There is magic hidden down under there. Tobbo Mott, also, you might not think it to start with, but it is a magical place, because that is where, and we're told in the same chapter, he knows the spells in order to be reforging Valyrian steel. So he is performing magic in there. Now, what is connecting these? Well, clearly at a high level, we've got this Song of Ice and Fire. This is about ice and fire against each other. So opposites are very much a part of this story. But here we have three places that are not immediately, obviously, on the side of ice or on the side of fire. They're not purely dragony things, and they're not purely I see others kind of things. They have connections in with those areas. They certainly do. Certainly, the Valyrian steel that obviously originally comes from Valyria. The House of the Undying outside with the trees they got there, the shade of the evening trees. These very much appear to be a sort of corrupted version of the weirwood trees, so there's a link in with that going on. But all of these things, I would argue, these are bits of magic that are happening underneath the greater theme of ice and fire, that are not directly linked to either ice and fire, but will have a role in the story in delivering the denouement that we need. Which is a slightly roundabout way of describing it. So I'll try and unpick what that is. There are certain rules of magic. Everything seems to be operating along the same rules of magic across the whole world. So having this same kind of color scheme, symbolism in these different places shows a connectivity between them. And the connectivity is also sort of symbolizing ice and fire as well at the same time, the two opposites which are there. But these things are independent of that, and yet they will play a very key role in the end game. Clearly, Valyrian steel is going to play a key role in what happens with the others. Clearly, what happened with the House of the Undying is going to have a key role, because that is playing into Euron, because he got their Shade of the Evening drinks, and also the visions that Dany got have been mapping out what is going to be happening to her. And then with the Faceless Men, Arya is going to be sent off. We'll cover Arya in just one moment. She's going to be doing some important assassinations, and they are going to be opposing primarily, I suspect, the dragons. So all of these things are important in the story, but independent from the main two forces. So they represent this middle ground, which is governed by the same rules, linked but independent, if that makes some sort of sense. It's George R. R. Martin is just wanting us to see the same kind of feel for these different places, is what I'm trying to say. Persephone saying, hello, Robert and Dan, the fantastic dog. I hope all is well with you both. It is, thank you. I have not been able to catch a live stream for 2 months because I've been in hospital with COVID-19. And I couldn't have my tablet, so I could watch on the good days. I just got home last night, and I'm so excited to hear this live stream. I have really missed them. Well, first of all, before even getting into your question, I'm delighted you're out, Persephone. Thank you for telling us. I just wish you all the best. It's a horrible, horrible virus, and if you've been in there for 2 months, then you clearly had it bad. So I'm really pleased that you made it out, and you have my very best wishes for continued healing and improvement over the weeks and months to come, because I know that this, for some people, it does drag. It's not just for many of us, this, if you get it, then it's just mild or just for a few days, but some people do get for a long time. So anyway, thank you for telling me, and all the best for you. My question is, how do they choose the next Sea Lord? Is there a line of succession, or do you have to take it over by force to become the new Sea Lord of Braavos? This is about, as I say, we haven't been told the exact mechanisms. Indeed, we've been told in the world of Ice and Fire, I can't remember the exact phrase that they used, but only people in Braavos themselves and only the political classes understand at all how this operates. So we're being told this is big and complicated, and the nuances are beyond us. But basically, if you imagine this kind of Renaissance kind of Medici world. That is what we're talking about. Yes, it's if you have power, then you can stay in power, but then people can turn against you. Lots of different political parties, alliances, people trying to use and utilize their own power to gain power for themselves. And it's all within this world where there are assassins and people having accidentally falling off of their boats and things like that. So that is how it operates. Basically, the Sea Lord has got a first sword of Braavos who, and let's face it, the to have a person who is there recognized as being the finest swordsman in Braavos, as being the bodyguard for the head of state, effectively tells you that they think that they might be the victim of an assassination attempt. So that's how it works. It's very bloodthirsty, and most people do not leave the post of their own volition, as far as we can tell. Persephone, the second question is about my favorite Targaryen, Daenerys. If she was able to visit Braavos, do you think that she would look for or find the house with the big red door that has lemon trees? Yeah, it is. Firstly, it's a lemon tree, which I think is interesting. I think it's important because it also, again, if this was, as I think some people have claimed, in somewhere like Dawn, then there would be lemon trees. But the fact that there is just one certainly seems to imply that this is an oddity and a rarity and a thing that you wouldn't necessarily expect. But that's just as an aside. She did appear to go back at some point, but I think geography implies, just in that period when they were just touring through the three cities, but geography implies that she will not go back there this time. This is always going to remain for her this unobtainable goal. So she will start off in Slaver's Bay and then work her way across the south. Now, tying this in with Braavos and a few of the things we've been talking about before, I was just sort of saying, and they will need to work out how to deal with Daenerys. When you start to see what is going to happen with her, you start to realize that actually this is going to turn from just being an abstract, well, what about that person thousands of miles away, to something real, a real and present danger to them. She is going to go with a massive fleet, with dragons, with sellsword companies, with possibly with Dothraki coming across as well, across the south of Essos. The Karth are probably going to try and take her on. She's going to destroy Karth, and if they come at her. Then we've got Volantis have already sent a fleet there. They are going to be got rid of. Then we've got Pentos, which is entirely possible that maybe the Dothraki themselves could head all the way over there. It doesn't. To me, if I were planning, how do I get the Dothraki across the narrow sea, I wouldn't send them all the way down, given how much they dislike water, all the way down to Braavos and then get them having months and months on a boat. No, you say go west, I'll meet you there. And given the fact that they may well be promising Barristan Selmy has promised the Tattered Prince Pentos, then the advice could just be you go off and you sack Pentos. And then before you know it, what you're going to see is that Braavos is going to be looking at all of the cities of Essos that are being crushed by this new power, Daenerys with her dragons and this massive army and this massive navy. She's going to have the Iron Fleet that she's going to take from Victarion. That's going to be going across. This is going to look hugely important, and it's going to be very, what are we going to do now? How do we protect ourselves? They're going to up their production. They are going to produce their navy at that point. Even if they think that she's not coming for them, they will have to protect themselves, because suddenly the world will appear a lot more dangerous than it has for quite a long time. So, but Dany, I don't think will go that extra bit up north. I think that she's going to be focused on going to Westeros, and so she'll come across and head down and land on Dragonstone. And I don't think that she will go to Braavos, and I think that this will allow the house with the red door to stay this kind of figurative home that she never had, this safe place that she can keep in her mind as without it being too complicated. That is her happy childhood memory, and I think that yes, George R. R. Martin could play with ruining that memory, but I think it would work better for her as a character to retain that and always have that in Braavos. That could be it, and maybe she could think afterwards she will go to Braavos next in order to find that place. Scott McDonald 666 saying, Robert, loving this series. Oh, good. I'm pleased. This is the first one I've caught live. Welcome. It's great to have people watching live. Will you be continuing with other similar deep dive videos aside from A Song of Ice and Fire? In terms of the live streams, yeah. So what I'm thinking, I'll probably do another couple. I'll do a couple more across Essos. Then I want to, one thing I asked this is something I do with my patrons every now and then, just say, where should we go with this? What do you want me to be doing? What kind of videos? And the most recent thing I asked, this is a benefit at $10 patron level, is I ask every now and then, do a little poll, what would you like me to do? And I said, what about the live streams? And the feeling was to carry on doing these ones on the Song of Ice and Fire, but also there are a few other things, perhaps picking up on some video topics that I've been doing. So maybe once I've gone through my Dance of the Dragons series, I will do one on that. Also Lord of the Rings. I'll be doing some Lord of the Rings live streams at some point, probably towards the summer. So I'm going to start mixing this up a little bit more. I'm definitely going to be carrying on doing these kind of things, so you don't need to worry about that. That's going to be carrying on, but I want to expand out as well as much as I possibly can, which actually gives me an opportunity to say, patrons, thank you. I do take on board what you say, and I'm going to carry on doing what you would like me to be doing. Is part of my way of thanking you, because I genuinely cannot devote the time that I do to this without your support. So thank you. If you are interested in supporting this channel, if you want to get access to some benefits like my audio narrations of the pre-release chapters from the Winds of Winter, then do check out my Patreon page. There is a link down in the description. Okay, so that all said, I think that's me caught up on questions from the chat. James Sledge saying, hello, Robert. Your videos have been getting me through the last several weeks as I get caught up on the last couple of years of your output, having drifted away from the channel a bit after the show ended. I entirely understand. A lot of people after the show ended did sort of drift away. Mike Hall, just picking up on the lemon tree issue, he tells us that when you're saying, if the lemon tree is in Braavos, why does George R. R. Martin keep telling us that lemons can't grow there? How will the mislead pay off? Because there is only one lemon tree. That's what we're told, a lemon tree, and they do grow in the courts and the gardens of the rich and mighty. So that is the payoff. And also the payoff is that it was sent from Dawn. So that is the link across, to get the link in with Dawn trying to, the Doran Martell's never-ending plan to marry the Martells to the Targaryens. That's always what he wants to do. James Sledge saying, my question is, on the show, Arya was able to continue to borrow faces and shapeshift even though she didn't seem to have completed her training and officially become a faceless man. Do you think this will also be roughly the way things play out in the books? with her departing her training before it is complete, and therefore never becoming a faceless man, but still gaining all the benefits. I was a bit confused by that on the show. If one can glean the benefits of the Faceless Men abilities without actually having to live as a faceless man and serve the purposes of the Faceless Men, it sets up some pretty serious questions about the internal integrity of the Faceless Men training program and recruitment process, does it not? Yeah, really good questions. So there are a few angles to come at this from. In terms of the can you do the putting the face on thing, that does appear to be it happened to Arya, and the magic appears to happen to the thing, not you being the magical person. So if Arya does escape with a whole load of these little face masks, then yes, she could theoretically carry on doing that. So that's there. In terms of the becoming no one thing, which you don't say talk about specifically, but I think this is part of this. I think there's we place too literal interpretation on this idea of becoming no one. When Arya goes down into sort of the bowels of the operations of the Faceless Men, she sees a meeting of all these people sitting around on their chairs discussing new assassination contracts effectively, and they are divvying them up, and this person says, right, this is for such and such a person is to be killed, and then some people say, well, I know that person, so I can't do that. So they have this. Yes, the first point is that this is interesting that you can't assassinate a person that you know, because then it might intrude on how you do the business and all the rest of it. But secondly, the clear implication is that you do not lose who you are. When you become no one, you do not lose who you are, because otherwise that would be a pointless rule. If they truly are no one, if they're just like this completely characterless person with no friends, with no history, nothing, it wouldn't matter whether you knew somebody that you were being told to assassinate, because that's not an issue. You are no one. So Arya was not, or the process of becoming no one is not to completely lose all identity. It is to become wedded to the cause to such an extent that you're willing to set yourself aside in order to serve the greater. That is the point of it. So let's not over or push this too far as the idea of what being no one is. But in terms of will she be able to or will she leave before she's finished her training like on the show? I think yes. Now, this is a matter of, in normal times, would that have been allowed? Probably no, but these are not normal times. I've already spoken through a little bit about these are not normal times, but we have to remember, and I said I would come back to this on the Faceless Men. The Faceless Men is a religion, a cult almost you could call it, but it's a religious order, and the things that I've said this many times before, but the things that we have seen as their cool catchphrases, all men must die, things like that, these aren't just cool catchphrases. These are statements of belief. They genuinely believe that everyone should die. That's just a natural part of the order of being human. So if, as is the case, suddenly they look around and see a world being enveloped by people who are not dying when they should be dying, that is heresy to them. So what are they facing? They are facing people, the others in the north with the whites. They are facing the priests of R'hllor potentially bringing people back, becoming fire whites, and they're facing Qyburn, who's creating these science whites. Arya has got her list. They know what her list. They know who's on her list. Who is on her list includes the Mountain and Cersei. If she gets trained up to be an assassin and then let loose to do whatever it is that she wants to do, she is going to go out and try to kill the very people the Faceless Men want her to kill. So I think in normal times, no, obviously they wouldn't just let her train up a little bit and let her go. These are not normal times, and they will be using her as a weapon to achieve their own policy goals, their own religious goals. So that, I think, is where we're at. With her, she will be allowed to go free because she is going to do the things that they want her to do anyway. Questions from John Martin. Oh, actually, not a question, just saying thanks for the great content, Robert. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. Mara Lee, thank you so much. 2 super stickers. That's very, very generous, Mara. Thank you so much. Saying you are amazing and thanks for being you. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Mara. You know how much I appreciate you as well. And you did actually coming to one of your questions at this moment. You did a super chat before we went live, just saying just a show of love and appreciation for all the fabulous content, merch and stories on both your channels. Thank you for all that you do for us patrons. Hugs to Dan, your handsome dog. So thank you so much. Your question was about Jaqen H'ghar, saying we know that Jaqen H'ghar is at the Citadel as Pate. I'm curious as to what the Faceless Men's role will be in the last 2 books. Will they be employed to kill someone important when things start to heat up in King's Landing? Will they take on an active role in trying to get rid of Dany's dragons? Besides training Arya to become a Faceless Man, what other important roles or tasks do you see them taking on in the books that was different on the show? Okay, so there are lots of elements to this. Yes, training Arya is going to be an important one. What is Jaqen doing? Well, I personally think what he's doing is he is trying to find the book, The Death of Dragons, that we've been told about a couple of times that is in Old Town. Why? Because dragons this is all connected in, they are trying to kill dragons. I think that they will be commissioned by Braavos, by the Sea Lord, the Iron Bank, Braavos as a whole, to get rid of the dragons. I think that is what they are hired assassins, and their target is to kill the dragons. I think that is what is happening now. So they, the Faceless Men, will want to get rid of all of this abominations, the people who should be dying and are not dying. They will be happy for the dragons to be facing down the others and the whites and all the rest of it. But once that has happened, they will then want to be killing the dragons. Now, whether the dragons will survive through to the end to allow them to be killed is a completely different matter. And I suspect that the book, The Death of Dragons, is simply about how do you poison dragon eggs. So they are just going to be learning about how to do that. But that, I think, is the thing that they're doing. They are opposing, first of all, they are opposing the abominations of people who should be dead and are not dead. Secondly, they have been involved in some key assassinations, Balon Greyjoy, for example. And then thirdly, I think that they are going to be involved in trying to make sure that dragons are eliminated from the continent, from Planetos. Second question from Yumara, saying at some point, either in the Winds of Winter or A Dream of Spring, Arya will eventually leave Braavos to head back to Winterfell. On the show, she used her Faceless Man training to help fight the others and kill the Night King. What do you see Arya doing in the last 2 books? Besides Cersei, who is still left on her kill list, do you think Arya will have a hand in Cersei's death? Or Littlefinger's death? I think she will have a hand in Littlefinger's death. I think that she will cross off a huge amount of she's got a whole, it's a bigger list. Ilyn Payne is still on it. Meryn Trant, she's still not got. The Mountain, Cersei. There's one other guy whose name I've forgotten, who was just a random person like Raff the Sweetling that she needs to kill off. So there are quite a few, and they are mostly focused around the Lannisters. So I think she will work her way through the Lannisters, kill off a whole and Lannister retainers, I should say, kill off a whole load of them. Yes, I think that she will head north. I think that she will be the person who ultimately kills Littlefinger on Sansa's orders. I think that with the way they set it up on the show, they didn't do a very good job of it, but I think it shows us what the broad strokes of the storyline is going to be. I think that Sansa will realize Littlefinger has to go, and I think that Arya is the person who will do it. Question from Lady Eternal, which actually I think this is largely picking up on the point that I was making just a moment ago, saying the expression on Jaqen's face on the show when Arya killed the waif and declared she was going home seemed to indicate that was exactly what he expected, if not outright planned. However, in the books, Arya's training has taken a different track. Do you believe the kindly man intends to train Arya to the same extent that the other Faceless Men are, or is she receiving an abbreviated education before being released back to Westeros, but one that would still suit the Faceless Men's agenda there yet? I think that's exactly what's happening. I think she will be trained until the point at which they can allow her to go back, and they may see it as releasing her. She will probably see it as her escaping, and that I think is the dynamic. But it's going to happen. It will happen in the Winds of Winter, I suspect. I don't know exactly how many. I did try and work through in my video about how big will the Winds of Winter be. Arya doesn't tend to have the most chapters in any given book, but she does have quite a few. I imagine that we're going to see, we've already definitely got one chapter of her. I imagine we'll see a few more in Braavos before she leaves. At that point, then I think that it won't be this sort of big chase scenes through Braavos. I think it's going to be her trying to sneak her way out somehow. Sydney Rose saying, hello, Robert. In your Traveller's Guide of Braavos, you went to lush detail about the culture, smells, and politics of Braavos. I'm glad you enjoyed that. I was curious if you could expand on the role of the Sea Lord. If there was one aspect of Braavos you would have liked explored in the books or show, what would it be? I think, yeah, so in terms of the role of the Sea Lord, I think I've covered that one already. What I would love is the politics. I just that it works so well for me, and it is something that George R. R. Martin has deliberately not shown us. And I think when he's not going to show us, because I don't think I say this, George R. R. Martin could go anywhere. This is his story. He can go with it where he wants to. Maybe he suddenly decides, you know what would be really cool? Having Arya assassinate the Sea Lord. That would be amazing, wouldn't it? And he's perfectly at liberty to do that. Someone will hire the Faceless Men, I suspect, to kill the Sea Lord. Would they entrust that one to Arya? Probably not. But maybe, who knows? He's entirely at liberty to do with this story as he wishes. Probably we are never going to see the politics inside. We're just going to be seeing Arya at a ground level in Braavos. And so I feel the lack of that. I have to say, there's another layer to Braavos that we're never seeing. Lady Eternal also saying, do you have any theories on what the Faceless Men's actual agenda in Westeros is? Why would they have ordered Jaqen into the Black Cells, which allowed him to then have a blanket invitation to join the Night's Watch? What was it they were after at the Wall, and why do you think Jaqen decided to change tactics and go after the death of dragons at the Citadel instead? Do you think we will see another Faceless Man at the Wall seeking what he was originally supposed to be looking for? So I think Jaqen was in the Black Cells, but I don't think it was to go to the Wall, because he would have then carried on to the Wall. He didn't. if the idea was to get Jack into the wall, starting him in the black cells, and just hoping that he would make his way through the civil war which was just starting, was probably not the most effective way of doing it. He could have very easily just got, like he did with Pate, he could have killed a member of the Night's Watch and taken over their role. That would have been a lot easier way this was not a way to get Jaqen H'ghar to the wall. So why was Jaqen there? I did a video on this ages and ages and ages ago, probably 3 years ago, but I still think it's right. The only logical reason for him to be there was indeed to join that group which went north, the part of the Night's Watch. If the plan was not to just join the Night's Watch, he wanted to be with that group of people. Why? He's an assassin, someone that he was there to assassinate. Who was supposed to be in that group who was going north? Ned Stark. So, who wants Ned Stark dead? Well, Ned Stark obviously never made it there because he was killed by Joffrey, but that people weren't expecting that. That was a surprise. Who wants Ned Stark dead? Who wants to make sure not only is he dead, but he does not actually make it anywhere near the north? Littlefinger. His entire plan would have fallen apart if Ned Stark made it as far as the neck. He was going to be offered, a deal was struck that he was going to be offered to go up to the wall and join the Night's Watch. The moment he made it as far as the neck, then maybe he would have carried on up to the wall, but he would have told people what happened down in King's Landing. He would have told them that Littlefinger betrayed him. That would then have completely ruined Littlefinger because Cat would have found out, and that is what Littlefinger cares about. He would not want Cat knowing that. So Littlefinger, who we get the hints in Game of Thrones Book 1, he mentions the Faceless Men. We see him, he seems to know how much they would charge. So the hints are already there. We know that he will have wanted Ned to be dead. And we know that the plan for him to be killed by Joffrey, that wasn't actually a plan. Yes, it happened, but he could not bank on that happening. He had to hire an assassin to kill Ned. And the way to do that was in that group, which was literally about to head off with Ned the next day. So that was the plan. Jaqen H'ghar hired to murder Ned, but then he didn't have to in the end. So when the first opportunity came for him to leave, he didn't take it. Why? Because he saw someone who fascinated him, Arya. And then he changed his face and went down to Old Town because he had another mission down in Old Town, which is the one that we know about. So that's what was going on with Jaqen H'ghar in the Black Cells, in my view. It wasn't about getting him to the wall. He could have got to the wall a lot more easily than that. Gashiola, Braavos can build a ship in a day. What do you think George R. R. Martin's plans are for this Chekhov's gun of a navy? Thank you for the wonderful content. Thank you very much. So, yeah, I sort of touched on this already. So they will build. The first thing is that, yes, they are going to build this navy. They're going to build this navy because Dany is going to be charging across the south of Essos with all of her navy, huge army, the dragons, burning things as she goes along. Volantis is going to get burnt. Karth is going to be destroyed. Pentos is almost certainly going to be sacked. So this is going to be huge. They are going to build their navy in order to defend themselves. If Dany, as she probably will, actually goes across to Westeros, they will probably hold, rather than up to Braavos, they will probably hold back and wait to see who takes the Iron Throne. And then they are going to intervene in order to say, if you are now the new ruler, you owe us all of this money. So that is what, and they will have to back that up with force. So that is what is going to be happening. The navy will appear, but we've seen navies against dragons obviously not as effective as we might think. Well, as effective as we might think, but not as effective as they might hope. Diego Godoy saying, "Hola, Robert. Hola." Apologies for the unrelated comment. Yeah, I've got 3 more questions, I think. So we're now starting to move around to slightly broader question. Derry asking where Braavos is getting the lumber for these ships from. They import it, and there are pines around the outside, so if they absolutely have to, then they can. The outer islands around the outside of the lagoon do have pines on. George R. R. Martin always quotes as inspiration the famous phrase, "The only thing worth writing about is the human heart in conflict with himself." I have all the hopes that he will in fact finish The Winds of Winter and Dream of Spring, but say ever he didn't, wouldn't this be an instant of George R. R. Martin's heart in conflict with itself? He has dedicated his passion in creating this tremendous world that not getting to finish it would be terribly ironic. Just curious to hear your broad thoughts on this. Yeah, it would be, I mean, I don't know whether ironic is the right word. Tragic would be the word I would use personally. I think what would be the heart at conflict with itself in this would be if George R. R. Martin desperately wants to finish this, but also desperately doesn't, because it's just too big a thing for him. I don't think that's the case. Incidentally, I don't think that's there. I could certainly imagine that he has built this massive world. The story is at its broadest at this point, and he's got to use the next 2 books to bring it back down to an ending. It's not the human conflict at heart with itself, if anything, is him trying to work out any shortcuts he could take to get the thing done. I personally hope he doesn't do that. I hope he does write all he has, even if it takes extra time, even if it takes extra books. I'm absolutely all for that, I have to say. And like you, I am fully sure that he will, certainly The Winds of Winter. A Dream of Spring seems a long way away, so I'm not putting any bets on that one, but certainly The Winds of Winter, I think it's getting closer. Mara Lee, another question saying, I know Braavos is one of your favorite cities. It reminds you of Venice, which it does, and Venice is an amazing city. If you ever get the chance to go there, when we can all travel once more, do that. If you could retire anywhere, either in Essos or Westeros, where would you like to live? Would it be Braavos, Highgarden, or studying to become a maester at the Citadel? I think I would love to live in Braavos in my younger days, but if I'm retiring, I think it's Highgarden. It just sounds delightful. And from Highgarden, you can happily just go down the river to Old Town and dip into the library there. I think it would be a delightful way to sort of spend your last few years. The weather's good, the books are there, and there's lots of music in the air, beautiful smells all around. It sounds excellent. So yes, Braavos, definitely for the wonder of the place, but for retirement, somewhere like Highgarden would be perfect. Josh Sagar, it's getting closer. You know we're desperate at this point. Yeah, absolutely. Desperate. I'm not going to rush him though. It's his thing. He can take as long as he wants, but each day he's writing it, we're getting closer to the end. Reflective Rambling saying, given that Braavos seems to be one place where the mummers are respected, is there a particular part of the stories you think would make a good stage production? And is there anyone you'd like to see involved in its creation? Perfectly, I'd love, this is a great question, by the way, Reflective Rambling. Personally, I'd love to see what Wilde would have done with a character already prone to snark and scheming like Elena. Absolutely, some great one-liners, I suspect, for her. Any of the plethora of minor characters get the Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead treatment, and see what someone like Tamor with experience of large-scale puppetry could do with the Dragonflight, or the Greens and Blacks bickering it out like Lin-Manuel rap battle style. So I think, well, we do see the production that Arya is getting involved with in Braavos is about earlier in the story. Effectively, there's a character there who is Tyrion, someone else who is, it's not 100% clear, but probably Sansa. And basically, and we saw it on the TV show, they're basically doing a farce, a very lowbrow farce of the events from earlier on in the series. I mean, what would I think would work well? I think there are some elements of this story. One thing I think George R. Martin writes particularly well is tragedy in a classic sense, that things, once you know the character, once you know the situation, looking back, you just see it's inevitable where it's going to go. The classic being the Ned Stark story, all the way through in Game of Thrones. The whole thing was just, you can see, reading it first time, you didn't see it, but reading back, you go, yeah, the whole thing, given who he is, given where he was, given the other people around him, that was always going to happen. And that kind of tragedy, I mean, it is properly Shakespearean. So yeah, if I had to pick that, but also I think if you allow me slightly more whimsical, I always think this kind of search for Azor Ahai reborn, with maybe it's that person over there, maybe it's that person over there, but in reality we know secretly that it's never going to be made that obvious. We're going to spend all our time, even after the whole things are written, then we're still going to be discussing who is Azor Ahai. Is Azor Ahai just a concept? And I love the idea of it being done in this slightly absurdist, waiting for Godot kind of way, waiting for Azor Ahai reborn. It would really work for me. But yes, a fantastic question. Let's get into, as I say, last chance to drop anything in the chat now. I'll try and have a quick flick through, see if I can see any more questions. Talking about funding the American Revolution here, which isn't quite about Braavos, but I love the digressions that happen in the chat. Robinson saying Robert should embrace his Englishness and go to Dawn, like all English pensioners go to Costa Brava. Yeah, I definitely still prefer sort of down in the southwest, I have to say. I'm trying to work out, I don't really know where the reach is, but in sort of mapping it across. Question, go to Venice before the city drowns. Venice, actually, after we finished all of the lockdown, the best time to go to Venice will be very soon, because and I don't know whether you saw this story, it's pure digression, but in Venice, the lack of economic activity in the sort of the Veneto region, with lockdown and with the lack of tourism around Venice, has suddenly meant that the Venetian canals, I hope it's still the way, this was when I saw this story about 6 months ago, the Venetian canals are incredibly beautiful and wonderful, but they are often quite murky. But suddenly they've become beautiful and clear as the lack of pollution and human-made detritus and all the rest of it. And so you can now see the fish swimming in and around underneath the boats, which sounds just wonderfully delightful. Obviously, you can't go there at the moment, but I think that the next, when things open up, if you're there in the first few weeks, that might be the best chance ever to be seeing Venice as it was centuries ago. Okay, I think Tyler Evan, are you going to do streams from all over Essos? I don't know whether I'll do all over Essos. I haven't decided what I'm going to do next time. I will probably do a few more of the Free Cities. Volantis is probably worth one on its own, maybe Marine and Slavers Bay. So I'll probably sort of pick a few bits rather than doing in huge in detail. The Reaches France suggests Mike Hall, yeah, with the kind of the chivalric inheritance that they have got going on there. Greet Weirwood saying no churning of the waters by the slow-moving motorboats. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, on the larger canals, that's how. And this is the beauty of Venice is that they don't have cars; that you go on boats places. So the larger canals will still have the boats going across. And Arcanix 1971 saying a Venetian told me that the story of the clear waters is true but exaggerated. I choose to believe the exaggerated version, given I will not be able to see it. But often that's the case with these things, isn't it? Okay, so I think with that, I am going to start to draw this one to a close. If you are enjoying these live streams and you would like to see a few more, there will be a link appearing somewhere around here. If you would like to support this channel, if you would like to get access to some of the benefits that I do for my patrons, there is a link appearing somewhere around here. That's all for this time. Take care, everyone, and I shall see you again next week.